I was thinking about the challenge of closing the gap uh, between what Tracy was talking about with the contrast between El Shaddai and Yahweh, and uh, how does that play into our role at the end of the meeting last week? I had uh, asked if there was a connection made between what Tracy was talking about and what our role was. And so that's actually been somewhat of a challenge for me to try to understand uh, what the gap is. How does what Tracy was saying tie into what our role is? And I just had a lot of thoughts, and I don't know if now is the time to try to share those thoughts or if I should be letting the meeting evolve a little bit and then tie into it. But anyway, one of the thoughts that had come to my mind was knocking on the door. I actually did a lot of writing on the topic, and then when I got through reading, it just looked like way too many words, and so I was trying to dumb it down, and it was still a little bit of a challenge. Uh, but I I have been trying to find my role since I was 16 years old. And everything that I ever leaned on seemed like it was just messed up. And so the what happened, and this is really where I would like to have some input. What happened was I contemplated the first time I was challenged with understanding my role. And I was a teenager, and I was experimenting with drugs, but I wasn't experimenting the context of way you hear people usually experiment. I literally was trying to do a case study. I was going to the library. I was reading information. I was reading information about the physical effects and the mental effects and all of this stuff. And all of a sudden it dawned on me that there might be uh, something something that's better to do after experimenting with all these drugs and looking at the mental challenges and the physical challenges. That was the very first time I had contemplated uh, my role. And at this point, I had just been introduced to the ideal of God and there being a God. And the conversation that I had with God ultimately was that I had confidence that He could show me why I am here. And and I never did lose sight of that. That particular moment is what I would refer to as knocking on a door. So when I was trying to dumb down all this flooding of information this week, the two words that I came up with was the one was knocking on a door, and the other is relentless. And so down through the years, I've been relentlessly knocking on the door. What I, the thing, last week I had answered, yes, I know my role, or it might have been the week before. Nobody had really, the question was not asked, well, Randall, what is your role? It was just, do you know your role? And I just immediately, yes, I'm asked, do I know? Yes, I know what my role is. Well, what's a challenge is that the way that question is asked, it almost looks like there is a single answer. which is my role is this dot dot dot. And it just doesn't play out that way. And so I had a lot of information and I went past all that. And if I were going to sum up what my role is after all of this thinking this week, the way that I would sum up my role would be like this. My role is to have the best access to what Yahweh intends on providing for me. So again, my role is to have access to the provisions to obtain the highest quality of life. And it seems like such a moving target, but one of the conclusions I came up with was being relentless and not normalizing things. There are things that are required to be relentless at knocking on the door. One is the willingness to be honest with yourself. That would include an absence of fear. And so our ability to see our own role is not going to happen if we have certain things in place. The one example would be, well, I'm going to end this in just a minute, but what I'd like to do is show the difference between what I thought was my role and what was actually my role. The one thing that I have long thought that my role was to be highly intelligent. Well, one of the main reasons why I thought it was important to be intelligent was to protect myself. And so I may look like I am trying to help someone out with my higher intelligence, but ultimately it's just been a way to protect myself, and it's come from a place of insecurity. When I was challenged, when I was challenged with Randall, what you think you got is shit, and it ain't nothing. I had invested so much in what I thought was good, just to find out and get reflected on that it was nothing. Well, after a space of time and challenge and my willingness to relinquish what I thought was right, what I found was that it truly was nothing. But now, if I look at my gifting, it's still tied to the same thing. It's just that it's not an act of being self-preserving. It's not an act of trying to impress people so that I can get by and be provided for. Now, if I don't have the answer for the moment, if I'm challenged in the moment and I don't have the answer, I do not have to lean on all of that value I placed in myself when it comes to being smart. I can be absolutely dumb and not really know anything, not really understand very much of anything, and I can be provided for. But ultimately, the provision is to meet someone else's need rather than being motivated to manage my own fears. So the gifting in one hand doesn't look like a gift, but whenever it's gone through a proper dying process and unpacking the traumas and making sense of the traumas, then the gifting no longer looks like it's self-serving. It looks like it's applied differently.
I think I got a lot of that. And I had a couple questions, but if I were to distill my questions down to one thing, I would ask the group What is the difference between an ability and a gift?
An ability is a contrived notion. A gift has been given by Yahweh. I don't know.
To me, when I think of ability, it's usually like it feels more like something that you have more than one ability that all encompasses your purpose or your gifting. The ability of a gift is to heal something or to trudge through something, whether that's, like I wouldn't consider, I'd almost consider them both side by side or together. To have a gift, you need to know what its ability is or what it's able to accomplish.
If I order it in my mind, I say that we all have abilities. I would say that an ability is something that we can do. A gift is the application of an ability, it is the aggregate of an ability administered. When we look at roles and gifting, it is how it is administered that makes it a gift. I can have, as Randall said, intelligence. I can have the ability to be intelligent, but I may not have the ability, the gifting to be able to translate that intelligence into something that is worthwhile and useful for healing or whatever my gifting is. This is, I would say, the difference between something Randall was speaking to, a contrived idea, as Sherry said, about your characteristic or your ability, or something that is actually a gift. A gift is something that works constantly. It's not, it happens in community. What I kind of wanted to talk about is this kind of area right here. And it's hard because how does somebody get from a place of understanding the difference between their abilities and their actual gift? How is a gift assigned? How do you know what your gift is? Yes, we can say we go through challenge, as Randall said, knocking on the door. But where is our real life example of understanding somebody or seeing somebody have a gift or having their gift assigned to them or them knowing what their gift is, having a knowledge of their gift? That transition point, can we see that anywhere in our lives? Do we have any examples of anybody who has gotten to that point?
Real quick, the question that I have is just to make sure if we're on the same page. Are we saying that when we say we don't know what our role is, are we saying that are the same, or do we mean differently? So are we really saying we don't know what our gift is, or are we saying we just don't know what our role is, or do we put those the same?
I would say your gifting, you'd have to know your gifting in order to know your role, because the strength of your gifting, I'm referring to Second Corinthians, I think it's 11, 12, or 13, where it talks about there are many giftings and many applications of gifts that are it is very variable. So there's a whole bunch of giftings, but there's a different applications, different levels to it. And I would say that is more the role you're talking
So those who kind of feel like they don't know what their role is, how do you see them the same?
I don't see them as synonymous. The gifting part and where it comes from is separate from our role in using them. I believe that everybody has propensity for gifting a certain way according to the deficits that they've experienced in life. Sherry has sensitivities when she mentioned something about her role about pulling people together. Well, ever since I've known her, she's always had something in her to where it was big hearted and it was about pulling people together. But that the role of that gifting has been not in the right context. That her sensitivities are there, but as long as she has undone trauma, sufferings, things that she hasn't reconciled, you could say that she has had a gifting, but as far as it making any real impact, as far as it playing into the role of making a difference for somebody else, no, that wasn't there, and the role did not come about until certain things were in place. Then the context of her gifting started coming to the surface. That would be my answer to the question.
And when we talked the last time, I think Stacy talked about not knowing what a role is. I think Jalen talked about knowing what his role is. I think you may have mentioned it, Randall. A few people saying they didn't know. Nate mentioned not knowing what his role is. The next meeting, I brought in the word gifting, and I was using it synonymously with role. Without a purpose, nobody will know what their role is. As a group, if we don't have a purpose, we will not know what our role is. So, for an example, I was sharing that, for instance, I have said in past meetings, hey, I you know, this is on the lighter side of the, hey, let's do a project. We need to have some kind of project. In the men's group, I talked about us, you know, maybe buying a house or so together for a particular purpose. Everybody can have a particular role in that purpose. There are certain things that I am not good at. Now, I think WA mentioned this a lot. The first meeting, she mentioned about me working on house. Well, we bought a house. My role is I'm going to put it together, but I don't know nothing about, so to speak, real estate and how to get this particular house. Now, I'm just using this as an example. I don't have those details. Maybe somebody else has, and maybe somebody else is more, has a better ability to do that particular thing. I'm just using a light example. Use that example, get down in several different areas of places for people to feel. So I'm going to stop there as an example. If you have no purpose, then there's no role. Nobody will fill their role. There has to be a purpose in order for a role to be established.
I have a question. Where does that purpose come? Where does that purpose come from?
That question for me, or is it general for everybody?
Anybody that can answer it.
I would say for me that my purpose is derived from the letters. When I look at my purpose, let me start off. What I define as my purpose is something that I try to, that's how I measure myself. That's how I measure anything that I'm doing and if it's having effect. The purpose is to imbue this, whatever I'm doing, with the letters so that it can have a certain effect. So when I look at anything, random things that I do, I always say, okay, the purpose is to communicate this law or to act according to this law and that will bring about the specific fruits. But yeah, that's what I would say my purpose is, or that's where it comes from.
It, if I, whenever I looked at myself, the first conclusion I came up with was, well, whatever my purpose is, it it needs to make sure I need to make sure it's not self-serving. So between that point and now, I've constantly had this question of how can I benefit others? And I've done a lot of things that I thought was benefiting others, but it was out of context. And so the next conclusion I came up with was that if I were going to really find the right context of what my purpose is, I won't be doing it in an isolated fashion. It will have to be with a group of people that are like minded. And I found that everything that I did, to get fulfilled by executing my purpose has fallen short. And so that one conclusion I came up with this week was that the purpose is not meant to be isolated.
Exactly, Randall. When I say purpose, where or today we're in Sunday school and they're going over the story of Joseph, and in short, it's kind of interesting. The subject is on heritage. Kind of how we talk about inheritance. That whole part of that story where he he ends up in Potiphar's house, and next thing you know, he ends up in jail or prison or whatever you would call it. Interprets dreams and gets out, interprets Pharaoh's dream, and then becomes governor. You know, Pharaoh's right hand man. And so I went to very interesting. I went to Genesis 15:6, where seemingly a purpose is being established to some degree. And Genesis 15 is where God is telling Abraham to get rid of Ishmael, and God promises him a son, and Abraham questioning that. And then it goes to the point to tell Abraham, um, interesting. He tells Abraham that they are going to be in a foreign land, or land that's not theirs, or whatever, and that they are going to go through. Um, it doesn't use these words. I'm paraphrasing. They're going to some harsh slavery-like experiences. This point, when we look at purpose, is that God first prophesied. I mean, it was a prophecy that was being revealed to Abraham that they were going to go through this experience. This is far before Joseph or anything. And so, first of all, when I was in church, and my purpose now, when I was in church, I remember sharing how God called us through slavery. And I remember people of the ministry, especially Black, were saying to me that there was something wrong with what I was saying, so to speak, because I am saying that God ordained slavery, that God ordained it, and there's no way that God would ordain such an evil. Well, how you know that something is ordained is the fact that it was prophesied far before the event happened. the God was pretty much saying, here's the course that they have to go through. That we're talking about purpose. And so he ordained it. He allowed them to go through some experiences for a particular reason. And in short, I shared that how earth as children of Israel going into Egypt as 70 so. And then next thing you know, they grow rapidly, and you're hearing the 9 month, the period of the woman conceiving a seed, and then next thing you know, it's growing in her stomach pretty fast, and it only takes 9 months before you're hearing all of that. It's really describing that experience. And I shared, in essence, why did God send them through? Why did God send them this particular experience? Why didn't he just um, Abraham go into the land of Canaan and have a whole bunch of children? And, next thing you know, they just have this uh, land, and they're helpful to people and all of those things. Why did they have to go through this harsh experience? Why? Can anybody tell me? We're talking about purpose now.
You have to go through something in order to understand it. How can you help somebody if you haven't gone through the suffering? When you think about the amount of suffering that the Black culture has gotten, the compassion, the empathy, all of that is being derived from their suffering in order to administer to others.
Okay, that's a good example way of saying it. That's a part of it. They had to, in order to relate to others, they have to go experiences. Uh, Also, there's a part of I shared that during the time after Noah, the flood, and then you hear about Nimrod building the Tower of Babel. And what began to happen of men at that time was, again, we're still talking about purpose. What began to happen to men at that time, the different nations at that time, was they began to think very isolated. They began to think very superior. Um, Different things like that began to happen. And so, uh, meaning man began to exalt himself higher than God. Does that sound like today? Do we feel like do we feel like, or do you feel like this modern, not this modern, but these technology is just a blessing from God? What do you think? Y'all got a cell phone. We can see each other on the phone now. Ain't this a blessing? The computer. We can do, and it used to be that when I was coming up, this Jalen's conversation went into this in a different way. But when I was coming up, or when I was working, at first, if I was out on the job, you didn't have no way to get in touch with me unless you had the number at the job that I was working. Because we didn't have cell phones. And at the time, at first, we didn't even have pagers or beepers. And I remember It's got my pager. And so you had to look. Bev couldn't get in touch with me, and she had to tell me whatever I was doing or whatever she needed to tell me when I got home. And when I got a beeper, she could beep me. Then I would go to a payphone, or I would ask wherever I was working, can I use their phone? And I would call a landline at home, and then we would talk about it. And so it's an evolution of change. Um, and so then after a while, they started coming out with these flip phones and all of this other kind of stuff, and boy, it was getting fancy. And it took me a while to get one. Ended up getting me a phone, and you know, we could talk to each other. We couldn't see each other, but we could talk to each other over the phone anytime she wanted to get me. And what it required, because of that, work began to speed up. It began to have way more requirements. um, uh, your boss gets in touch with you, and if you were out of the job and he didn't have a way of getting in touch with you, she gave you the task that you had to do when you got back to the job, and then the next day you went and did it. Now he expects you to do that task now. And it starts getting faster and faster. In one sense, we say it's good, but another sense is it's very destructive. So in short, we're talking about purpose. Back in that time, Egypt was probably one of the most, if not the most advanced nation there was at that time. And they were a mother, so to speak, of nations, of different nations. They were a powerhouse, probably the powerhouse at that time. And so God sent the children of Israel, birthed them through this mother. Their belief system, what they believed, they didn't believe in Yahweh. They didn't have Yahweh. I think of the name. You all know it. Some of you all know the popular name that is used for what Egypt, what they worship, but I can't think of it right now. But anyway, in short, um, God took the children of Israel through the wilderness. He gave them the land of Canaan for a particular purpose. Randa touched on it. There has to be a unity. It can't be an individual perspective. So we understand that our purpose cannot be individual uh, divided. It has to be one mind. Here is our purpose. That's what you see happening to the children of Israel. Then it goes into um, the different roles that each tribe had to fulfill that particular goal. One of the questions I wanted to ask before, um, one of the questions that I want to ask is, I'll get my mind and have to come back. So anyway, I'm just, when it comes back, I'll bring it back up. The role of children of Israel is to have such an impact on the world around them, to where, simple way of saying it, oh, we're going to introduce man to God. There's a weak way of saying it, uh, very poor, weak way of saying it. The question that is, I don't expect somebody may be able to answer it, but I'm to do that. You all do that. what was one of the biggest and primary, I'm going to use the word role, of the children of Israel? What was the biggest or primary role? Can anybody tell? Besides introducing people to God, what was one of God's, throughout the prophecies and everything, what was one of the children of Israel's biggest failures? I read about it today, of doing. They failed to do what?
To visit
To visit
orphans
the
and
fatherless and
um,
the widows in their affliction. That's what, if you read throughout the prophecies, some of the things that why God said he was going to handle the children of Israel, he was, because they failed to do. This is the failures, to visit the fatherless and the widow from their affliction, or to deliver people out of oppression. Is that a purpose? That's a purpose, isn't it?
yes,
Is that a need today? Is that an individual purpose or a group purpose? Every gift is going to fit within that structure. Every role has to play within that structure. We, is our country sick? Is our world sick? Do we have a purpose? How are we going to go about accomplishing that purpose? Why did I say buy houses? Why did I say it? Is there a purpose? And where do you fit in that purpose?
By buying a house, you would be able to help those who can't provide for themselves or help to balance out um, the oppression that is even in place with the current market specifically. Some people don't have the option, they can't see a way out because of trying to survive. So taking off some of that weight would allow them the time and space to heal.
That is the time, when you say a time and a place to heal, building a safe place, or the fact that the way that greed is today is they will sit up there. That's why I remember sharing with you, Crystal, several times. The way things are really set up today is that it's man for man, and I got to make my money. So why do you have inflation? Is there a way to build a city that has no taxes? This is all purpose. This is all the purpose of the children of Israel. This is all their purpose. Is there a way to build something in which there is not usury? The scripture talks about taking away usury. So if I loan my brother money, I'm not trying to make money off of the money I loan. Is that what we live in today? Then the end result is decay. The end result is our younger generation not wanting. The end result, if that usury is slavery, do we have a purpose? When Martin Luther King marched, what he charged the religious world of oftentimes was that. How can you say you're Christian and you see these people struggling in life and you tax them more? Do we have a purpose? Where do you fail that role? What is your role? And it is not individual. I mean, it's not, when I say individual, it's individual roles, but it is not independent. It's not like Randall said, well, my purpose is I'm going to go build houses, but I'm building houses so I can make money. And so that's still under the same system of usury. So then it becomes a purpose to build a city, a community in which there is freedom. There is liberty. We're not bound by these heavy taxation on down the line. We don't have to worry about usury. I said again, in the Hebrew system, the church that I taught that you can live free from sin. I know how y'all be doing it. It taught that you can live free from sin. That means that you have such a relationship with God that you don't any sin. And so now the Baptist said different. You can't live free from sin. I forgot how they said sin you must, sin you can't help it. That's how they put it. Now, does the scripture teach that the way it taught free from sin was it said, number one, part of the law said that if you loan your brother your land or some money because he was in a bind, that you couldn't, number one, tax him on it. Oh, first of all, it said that you cannot borrow from any country. You couldn't borrow from Egypt. You couldn't borrow from Assyria. You couldn't borrow from any country at all. I want you to think about what I'm saying it. It said, but you can borrow within your house from brother to brother. You could borrow. It was lawful to borrow, but it was not expedient. And what made it lawful is there's a law here. There's a law, no borrow. And what made it, there's a statute here that applies that says that if you borrow within the house after 7 years, you didn't pay it back, those kind of things, then basically the debt looked like it was forgiven. The reason why is because after 7, it automatically begins to impose guilt on your brother. The weight of debt begins to cause it begins to cause a decline within the house, the weight of debt. So the 7-year wiping it away was to cause that not to be cause guilt to be applied upon anybody who was in debt to you. Other than that, guilt throughout scripture equals sin. It equals sin. Every time you carry weight of guilt, your behavior without you even have no control over it, you will sin. Guilt, that's what it causes. So it's really saying keep the house full and free and without guilt. Now, you think about taxation, I'm giving you a lot of detail. So in short, I'll stop kind of speak on whatever they think. But in short, there's a purpose, there's a role that everybody plays in that picture of making sure, number one, we are healthy, that we are effective, that we have a particular purpose in life that begins to move in the direction of relieving the oppressed. All of those things are the main established role from God. The reason why God took the children of Israel through that experience was just to do that, to relieve those who are oppressed. That's the main role. That is still the main role today. Where do you fit in that? What's your role?
Well, I think that from what I've seen, what you're saying is something that Black people would really benefit from. And I'm honing in on Black people, not to say that other people wouldn't benefit from it, but Black people, their challenge to what you're saying, their rebuttal to what you're saying would be why it's strange. Okay. Black people distrust this system that we're in, but we're also taught to be fed from it, to be fed by it. So Black people see going through this system, getting debt, getting an education from this system, living out Greco Roman sort of principles as a way to get ahead because we have been oppressed. So Black people have suffered for so long. And even if you want to just consider slavery and Jim Crow as a concentrated point of suffering, and maybe after that point, maybe we're just dealing with the remnant of that that's still like a residual that's still suffering in some way or oppression in some way. But Black people have, for generations in this nation, dealt with oppression and suffering and the ramifications of these things for generations. And the idea of going about healing very slowly, very meticulously, very methodically, the idea of going about it that way, I'm sure, given what we've experienced in our nervous systems, emotionally, mentally, that feels like that's going to take too long for the average Black person, the average Black family. Um, and so I would say it's similar to what we know about when Israel left Egypt. They left Egypt and they wandered for 40 years when really that trip really would have been a fairly direct few-day trip. So there's one process that takes very long and it doesn't always really produce the best results, or there's the process of dealing with something very directly. And I think that what you're describing, even though it feels long, it's thorough. And you were describing earlier that the way that, like, you talk about technology and everything, like, there's an aspect of it that's good, but also can be destructive. I feel like I'm trying to tie in too many thoughts. Simply put, um, Black people are in a place where we don't want to take the long road there. And there are aspects of the healing process that require a long road. But it's still the most potent and it's still the most powerful. As far as what I think my role is, um, I am very passionate about all things youth, family, and creative. And so I think I've always been geared towards helping families connect with each other, helping parents connect with children. Um, because I see that the system that we're in is advocating for us to work very, very fast. Um, and I want to help Black people slow down in a sense, and be more direct and purposeful in the things that we do, and to learn how to be self sufficient in that we're not relying on the system the way that we typically have. So, my role, I guess, is just to bring awareness um, to how we're living, bring awareness to the way that we're living, and to, through like education of sorts, help Black families kind of connect and ease and relax their nervous systems and everything. Hopefully that makes
That's a good description, David. A good start in dealing with how you see role and what your role is?
I relate a lot to Darvier's role. Um, I feel like I've spent since I was like 16 trying to get my family to stop being individualistic so that we wouldn't have to spread our resources as thin and we could make more progress together rather than trying to do things on our own. But people often get caught up in, their space and their personal needs and feeling like that just won't be able to, or even just personality wise, like, oh, I can't be around that person. And while my family thinks they're doing a good job at being united, and they aren't, because they're still doing their own thing while, maybe living in the same house. They aren't still pulling their resources to one purpose. I don't know that I would say that I have the same role though. I know that I find a lot of my sensitivity to, I don't have a better word for it, like unwanted children. And I often uh, find that I feel like I take the role of filling in that gap in people's lives where they feel their parents maybe, or their maybe even their siblings or distant cousins, aunts and uncles, just they didn't feel accepted. And I've seen that can cause a person to operate very sacrificially of themselves, but not from a giving place, but from trying to receive something, trying to receive that acceptance or belonging. And so I found myself trying to give people a place with me and my family, that belonging. And I've found lots of difficulties with that. I don't think I have attacked it the correct way. And I also don't think I necessarily chose that. I think my life chose that, as it was something I saw a need from a very young age and started within my own home. But I still see a need for that today.
Yeah, that's good, Star. And you said it. The question, I didn't know how to ask it, but you really answered it. The part where you say that you don't know if you did it, correctly or whatever, something like that. Because the question that I was going to ask is, how much do you need to understand the law? And when I say the law, I mean really the Torah, in order for you to implement that correctly. Anybody in there, whatever they want to say, how much do you need to you understand this, the law and the statutes, in order to implement that correctly? This is I think Davier is saying, it looks like a long route, a long road or something like that. Because you may have this passion for it, but everybody that you get in, let's say your passion develop, let's say your passion was because you saw people. The point that I'm making is, if you do not heal from, if nobody heals from a victim perspective, but yet they see people, even though I have been victimized, if I look at it through victim perspective, what I'll do is I will begin to, just like the younger generation, say, pull people back. They don't understand us. And so I understand you, but they don't, and you start doing things like that, and it's counterproductive. Or in the beginning, when we started the group, there was that's the old so to speak, we're younger, we do it this way. Where those type of divisions pull, we can't work together like that. Where those type of divisions come from has to do with whether or not I still am acting like I've been victimized. The point is, if you don't heal, your role, even though you have that passion to do that, is trash. I'm not wanting to stick on that, but that's what came to my mind when you're saying it. As you started healing, there are doors that Yah up, but all of us are supposed to be connected with you in that in that in that particular thing. What you partially described is covering. That is a call that is placed on every single of us, a purpose. Covering. You described covering. That makes sense. That is a purpose. My side of it, when I said, hey, let's get houses, a part of that also for covering. It had to do way more than that. It's way bigger than that. I'll stop there. Let it somebody else. You and Daria did real good sharing. What is your role? What's your contribution in this fight?
uh, I know that until certain things evolve, that my role is limited. Right now, my role is to respond to the challenges of the day, challenges of the moment. But if I'm responding to it, the one thing that you really kind of hit a home run with, Tracy, is I don't know how to respond if I have any victimhood in me, if I have any guilt, if I have anything other than the law working in my members, then my response regarding my role is going to be even more limited. So right now, my role is to really understand how I respond to challenges, but also how everybody in my space responds to challenges. I long for the day that we all have a project that we might work together, and that really kind of brought me to another question: is it even possible for us as a group to have the same project to work on when we live so far away from each other? I mean, right now I identify my role, but my role seems to be limited. There's not really a big project that includes, my like-minded brothers and sisters. But I'm doing the best I can. I want to know what evolving to all of us having that mutual thing.
Before we can get into that, I think everybody needs to work through really talking about the role is. But I think you bring out very interesting point. Question is there's something that about too, but I think I don't know what you give everybody you did that you give everybody a way out saying what their role is.
I don't want to do that.
Tracy, I'll just say I think that what you shared is super important about being, if you still see yourself as one who's like victimized, then it's almost to say you won't really be able to see clearly when it comes to healing others or helping others heal. Like that verse, that passage in Matthew 6 about judge not, lest you be judged, really is a picture of being like going through a process in order for you to be able to help others go through a process. And if I'm still seeing the extent to which I see myself as victimized, that's only as far as I will be able to help others. Like I won't be able to see past that. And it's interesting because I will say in the last maybe year or two, or maybe like a year ago or more, I started to see that I had that behavior of feeling like I had been victimized. And maybe to some extent, yes, in certain situations, but it was to the point where it was very crippling. Um, and I could shift blame fairly easily. And that's something that I think I keep on my radar now because I always feel like um I don't know, it's very easy for my perspective to shift that direction that, oh, I'm a victim. And so I've kind of been working towards how can I be empowered in this situation? How can I be empowered to move, to progress in this moment? Um, and it's honestly been very healing over the last couple of years. And there are things that I have like the ability to do that I would like to do that I feel like would be very helpful, but I'm like slow to pulling the trigger on those things because I want to make sure that I've gone through a thorough enough process to where I'm doing this from a proper place. Granted, I understand that there are levels of the process. And to answer your question, you were saying how much of the Torah, how much of the law does the person need to understand? I think that they need to have a foundation, which I would say is wisdom. And then they need to go through a process to where they develop understanding. Because if they develop understanding, they at least have um, a level of comfort and familiarity with going through a process. So if they do encounter something that they haven't personally dealt with, the process is still the same. So you know you have to go through challenge. So if you are familiar with the process of going through challenge, then it would be much easier for you to be able to help someone else navigate going through challenges. So I think that some afflictions, some issues are going to require you to have fully gone through a process through wisdom, through understanding, through knowledge, and some things you can it will require you to have gone through understanding and be mature to an extent. Um, yeah, and then you brought up covering. It's interesting where I am with covering. I used to be very resistant to this, um, and I still in my nervous system, in my body, I feel a level of resistance. Although in my journey, I've come to a place where I can understand this is essential, this is important. And so now I'm like kind of working on shutting down those reflexes that tell me to withdraw, that tell me I don't need this, because I come from a very independent, individualistic, I can't say individualistic, but very independent environment where no, you get it on your own. You get it out the mud. It's just you. Um, and we were taught to kind of almost wear that as a badge of honor. And we don't really realize that we kind of end up victimizing ourselves in that process, or at least disempowering ourselves from receiving help. And as long as I know that as long as I run from covering, as long as I run from community, as long as I run from connection, I will never fully be able to know what my role is, what my gifting is, because that's where you discover it is being in community and going through a process to where you find out what your strengths are, you find out what your weaknesses are, and naturally you will find yourself in situations and being able to be effective in this particular thing. Um, and I'm in the process of learning so much about myself and about what my weaknesses are. Um, just to be transparent with you all, I'm in the process of finding out how to get evaluated for ADHD. And I've been examining my life now and in the past, and I've been able to see, like, oh snap, this is something that's been present for a very long time. Um, and I had internalized a lot of it as shame, or as me being as shameful, and as me being just this very incompetent person, which was very uh which presented a lot of friction with the fact that my identity had always been based in Darby is the person that's going to know, Darby is responsible, Darby is competent. So it's always had created this war in me and this lack of clarity about who I was, and presented a lot of insecurities and everything. And the more I've learned about myself and where I'm not very competent or proficient or masterful, I've been able to accept myself a lot more, and I'm a lot more relaxed about what I can and cannot do. And so I know that that's been, I don't know, that's just been very important for me in this time. And I'm really looking forward to the woman's trip soon, because I normally feel like I have to completely rationalize why I would ever gather with anybody, why I would connect with people. It has to make the most, the uttermost sense. It has to be logical. It has to have a very definitive purpose. But I think that going on this trip and gathering with women that I'm not super close with, that I haven't known for a super long time, I'm just excited to go through that process and see what it ultimately brings. I think that it's going to start challenging and defining a lot of things in this area that we've been talking about giftings and roles and having a purpose and being in community and covering. These are all different things I think that trip is going to be able to address.
To what Darby A said, I haven't even gone on the trip and I'm already being challenged. I'm realizing some things that where I'm limited. The girls are trying to do the itinerary, and I had this emotional reaction
Mhm.
in the group on the last session, and I didn't understand where that emotion was coming from. And what I realized is any trip we've ever gone on, Randall's done the itinerary, and I never had to sort through that stuff. And I can't be a part of that. I can go on the trip and be organic with whatever they put together, but as far as me trying to put a trip together, that ain't me, you know?
Oh yeah, Makai, were you gonna say something?
No, Starry wanted me to say that it's she wanted me to tell her my thoughts that I was telling her. But I see the lack in the physical application of our purpose. Um that we can talk about our purpose and agree generally this is what we're doing on the meeting, but to come together, as you said before, and actually physically apply that purpose is what we're all needing. And I know you said that before, and I was gonna. My thing is, why haven't we? If we've always agreed and we're continuing to agree, and I'm assuming the silence that I hear in this meeting is agreement, then where's the action that we need to take? Because if, as you said before, if this is boring, if this is mundane, we don't have to do it. So emotionally, I'm ready to start picking on people to say, okay, if you don't want to participate, if you don't want to establish a role, then don't be here. If it's not a priority, then it's not a priority. I don't like, personally, no offense to anybody, this is my feelings. I don't like feeling like I'm being lied to. I don't like it when I feel like somebody is paying lip service to an idea, but not going to actually come together and do anything about it. And I think that's been a big problem with Black people for a long time, is that we'll get together and we'll talk about something real well, and there'll be all these high thoughts and high points. When it comes to actually putting feet to the pavement, everybody got cold feet. Everybody got an excuse as to why they can't do something about something that they speak so highly of. But that's just my thoughts and my feelings.
I think Micaiah done put some challenges on the table, about what he was, sharing. So how we're gonna answer that?
I don't think our silence should be taken as us not doing anything because we're all growing and moving towards something. I mean, myself, I still don't know my purpose. I can tell you the things I tried to do, you know, in my life, so, but I can't say that maybe the reason why it didn't work out because I wasn't balanced. Like, I've always been in a place of trying to be helpful. I was a Sunday school teacher. I did fostering, so I've always been in a place of trying to be of help. But I would say that, just looking back, um, there are certain things in my life that weren't balanced. So now I've come to the place of down to zero again. So now I need to learn how to build myself in a way that would be more balanced. So, and then speaking of, it's interesting that we have, well, I guess we've been having this conversation, but I've always been in a place of trying to help and being of help while having needs that I haven't met in myself. And I was thinking of yesterday how, I want to help my family because we're struggling. It seems to be that we're struggling financially. We're all struggling financially. And, and I thought money is what would be help, is what we need help with. But now I'm come to the understanding that it's not money. So that's where I am right now, understanding that it's not money. And this conversation that we're having kind of helped me get a better understanding, but it is not concrete yet as to something that I can actually do and because once I know my role, I'm going to do my role. So and I think that some of us are still in that learning process, and it don't mean because if you're swimming underwater and that person hasn't come to surface doesn't mean they're not swimming. It means they just haven't come to the surface yet. So I think that we're all in the process of learning, in that when we learn and when we've all learned and cultivated all these things that we're learning,
Mm.
what you will see will be dynamic. But we do have to continue to learn the process, and so that when we come to the surface, it's beautiful.
Thank you, Heather. I understand what you're saying. I think you have a, a point there. I didn't know how to illustrate it, but you brought out one side, Javier brought out the other side. Javier, uh, that's one of my girls, and she, for Javier, when she was speaking, I want to tell CJ some degree. This is something what Kayla and I talked. I put CJ in this category. I put certain people. I've had this with Mando, and I'm talking about the other side of what Heather said. Sometimes it's like you are still trying to build a bike, and and the way I try to handle you is let's take the trainer wheels out. Oh, you ready to go? You might crash. but that crash is the challenge. That's necessary. Get back up and get on that bike again until you get it down. But you don't need these training wheels anymore. Meaning some of you are all in different places. That I think what Heather brought out. I think she brought it out real well. We're all growing. We're all in different places. And some of you have training. Some of you still may need training, which is okay. That because all of us have had to have training wheels at some point in our is a way that I would say it. But then some of you used to the training. So in saying part of thing, I think Randall brought out, it's tying it all together. For someone like Heather, I think we as a group still have a particular project or purpose that what Micaiah called physical. It's going to be challenging because of the question that Randall had. Do you think that we can all agree to do one thing and everybody is supporting in accomplishing that task? I think I'm jumping. Part of what Sherry's bringing out is they agreed to go on a trip, but she struggled with some of those, and this is going to come up. This is going to come up. It's going to happen if we agree on one particular thing to do. And everybody's going to always, but you got to work through that until you are of one mind. That's when you're really effective. In short, Randall has been committed to that. Probably more so he's one of that has been so committed to that one mind. Okay, you say one mind, we're gonna stick to it, fight it out till we conclude this. It reminds me of that all the time. So we can start a project, we can have a project, and then as someone like Heather or newcomers, Brian, who is watching, they'll pick up, they'll see, okay, I see what's going on. Here's what I have. This is what I can do. So in essence, it doesn't put the pressure on them that they have to just get out there and do something physical now while they're still trying to find their particular place. But some of you are already ready to fill a role. There's enough of people enough in the group that are ready to fill it.
I'll say this to be more specific. I'll say that my frustration is mainly with the younger core because I understand where the older people are at. There should be way more initiation out of us to pioneer these places in a physical way. And as you said already, the older generation is going to be more of a support. So when I'm saying I'm frustrated, I get upset. It's because we need to come together as a younger core and do something.
So, Makai, I need to understand. I need to make sure I understood you correctly. Are you were saying just the basic of it is the young people have the strength and the wherewithal. The young people have the older people have what?
They're not as strong with initiating anymore.
Yeah, I agree. So I can say that the older, not all the older, have as much initiation. Over the year, when we first started the group, there was that tug of war. The younger got all of this energy that the older don't have this energy, and the younger feel held back. And there was a process of that needed to happen. I feel like that. I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like that has balanced out a lot more than the older people just holding back now. There, in essence, has not still in a nothing set forth to other than what I said. Hey, and I gave my reason. I didn't give enough reason, but I said, look, let's have a project. Let's pull together. Let's do whatever it takes to buy a house. We can utilize that as several different things. We need to establish an inheritance. No, no ministry is successful with it. You have to, and if you understand, that's a lesson, several lessons as to inheritance really does. Right now we operate. Right now, I'm not just saying us, but a lot of people operate from a very deficient state. What an inheritance is when someone it's a foundational piece, and it is with it there you will never operate under deficiency if you have an inheritance. If you don't have an inheritance, mom and dad did not leave me anything. Now, inheritance always seems like money, but they didn't really leave us anything when they passed away. The way that God said it briefly is in every family. If as a father, I am under the kingdom of heaven, and so there's certain values and riches that I get from that particular thing, and so I got a plot of land in the land of Canaan, and what I did is I utilized that land to provide for my family all kind of things, and I grew it. So when you start hearing the scripture of God gave this man one talent and he grew that talent, and he said, because you've grown it, I will give you more. That is inheritance. That is inheritance language. So as a father, I have 100,000. I worked and I grew my talent into $100,000. Now I'm too old to initiate like that anymore. So I passed that $100,000 to my son. My son increases that 100,000 to 200,000. When he gets old, then he passes it to his son. His son increases it to 300. That is how an inheritance is designed. You and I don't have nothing like that. That is how it is designed. And it's supposed to be passed down and never depleted. It never is supposed to deplete. So in short, I just shared that little bit. And I'm saying, here's an area that has to be established among us. We need there needs to be a start establishing an inheritance. So when I work with families are like Chauncey and Crystal, I'm saying, look, your children are your inheritance. They're your retirement. You invest in them. That means everything that you do should be so that you can deliver them this nice package. Here's $100,000. They are to take that $100,000 and grow it. How you retires off of the dividends of what they grow. That is how to set it up. That is more safer than a 401k, and it will never be depleted if you do it right. That's how it's set up. That's how the Bible set it up. Or you can think individually and say, I'm going to do it this way, and I'm going to get into what I want to do. You can go all of that kind of stuff and not really pass down any heritage. That is what we have had over the past few years or decades. No heritage established at all among our families. And the core of that has caused the younger generation to start saying, hey, Jalen was hitting last week from drugs to cheating, all kind of ways of finding a shortcut, but I ain't gonna work like they did. That's where it is today. Now, I might have went too far, but we and what you said, Micaiah, does anybody have anything, a physical starting point? I've given that hey, this is where I think we can start. Then everybody has to come to mind with that particular point. Ask questions, challenges, find out what the value of it is or purpose of it is, all of that. You don't have to jump on it just because, but we got to have something. All right, Crystal, you sitting on it.
That's funny. um, yeah, I don't know that I have to think, but I was thinking on some of the previous points that were being made, just kind of processing some of them. And it made sense, the things that you said as far as um basically needing to be, and I think Darvier touched on it and Heather touched on it, um, needing to be healed in order to operate properly in whatever the role is. And I know for me, I've recognized the areas of ineffectiveness in what I understood my role to be, and have been able to connect the ineffectiveness with where I need healing in how I'm processing. So, um, another point, I struggle. I know there is generational gaps, differences to a certain degree, but I really struggle with how in each generation there seems to be the older versus the younger. That was the case when I was when I was a teenager, young adult. The older leaders would talk about, how the young people didn't have a desire for the things of God, air quote, and the young people would take it upon themselves. We're gonna do this. We're gonna go out and we're gonna witness or whatever. And um, we would feel the constraints of the elders. That's not how you should do it, or if you're going to do it, you need to follow this protocol, or whatever. A lot of red tape. And so it was almost like we were never really, we were going back and forth with the older versus the younger. But I think really one of the things that's really been refreshing as we are growing as a group is how it's truly designed to operate as a unit, as a body.
Yes.
Each piece doing what it's supposed to do. It's not delineated or segmented by age or by gender or by race, but truly that um I think, Tracy, you called it a dance, learning how to really dance, how to move and to follow and to flow with what's going on. And to me, that's the most refreshing part. So it does not put a pressure that causes fake action or action out of obligation. Well, I don't want to seem like I'm holding up young people, so I'm gonna say everything. And it's like, no, I don't need to do that either. Um, so I really think that that is one of the most refreshing parts, is as we continue to go through this process, it flows. It's like it doesn't, it's harmony. It truly is oneness, because at the core is the understanding of the principles and the operation of the principles of the law. So
Thanks for sharing that. Um, it sounds like yours, Crystal, reminds me of really what a different way of saying, Heather said, giving time, giving space for you or whoever else to develop and grow, and we all grow um, at our own paces. Our
not,
own.
not really, because there are a few in the group that don't let you grow at your own pace per se, that can make sure to be the pruners per se, or the diggers, to help motivate or inspire, because I couldn't be like, I ain't there yet, I ain't there yet, I ain't there yet. And it could take me 30 years, quote, to get there. But part of where we come in as brothers and sisters is that accountability, or that piece of, now it's not quite my own pace.
The way I would say it, Crystal, is sometimes when you are pushed, oftentimes it's because not you, but when people are pushed in the often time it's because in essence what I said in the beginning, you have training, you should be you're ready to go here. So sometimes we get in a comfort zone. I think Jen, I mean, I is hitting some of those. Sometimes we're in a comfort zone and we're really capable of doing more than what we believe we're capable of doing. If that's the case, then it's a push. But that is not saying that we're stopping you from at it at your own pace. What I mean by pace is if you were if you were acting in I'm prepared for this moment, then there would not be a push. But when you're actually holding back, then we say, okay, wait a minute. We gotta nudge you a little bit and encourage you. Look, you're beyond that point. That's what I mean by that's still letting someone at their own pace. Because your real pace is this, but you're saying, I can only run this fast. I can only run 1 mile an hour. And I'm saying, no. You can run 5 miles an hour. What are you gonna say, Randall?
Like to directly address where there was a sticking point. When we had a conversation about taking on a project, the one conclusion that we came up with was, well, we didn't want to go into debt because that's really kind of going against the law and it plays into the system. It doesn't oppose the system. It almost says, well, we're going to have to work with the system to beat the system. And so we all decided that we didn't want to do that. So when we said, well, let's work on a cash basis and let's contribute money to one account. Well, where the sticking point, when we had that part of the conversation, where the sticking point was, well, who is going to be the one to decide? And one of the things that you'd brought up was, well, if everybody's contributing, but then the decision making for everybody's money belongs to one or two people. Well, as soon as we got to that part of the conversation, it all dropped. And there's no account and there's no contributing to money. And this has to do, all of this ties into the challenges that I've had this week as far as what does knocking on a door look like? Well, I've been knocking on doors for a long time and the wrong thing is answered, but I was relentless. I did not stop knocking on the door because there was a challenge. I started banging on the door. Well, I have a real tenacious disposition about me, and I'm very relentless. But I don't feel any confidence of operating with any kind of tenacity or relentlessness as far as pushing back in this group. I don't have the confidence to push through those points. I feel like I'm kind of in my place, more riding in the back seat than front and center. But the word that comes to my mind, and this is something that I observe and I question, and that is the word follow through. If we have a good ideal that is good up to a certain point, but we have a sticking point, who is going to be the one to push us through the follow through? I feel strongly compelled to not be that person. Who's going to step up and push us through those sticking points.
I think
Uh,
that's where the relevance of our giftings come in. In my mind, if we get a non-for-profit organization started, Randall has a lot of resources that would back up as far as income, but anybody in this world ain't gonna contribute unless you have that. And I have the ability to get that going. And then somebody needs to name it. And then somebody needs to create what it looks like on paper. So I'm limited with my role in it, but I can initiate the non-for-profit and get it started. But I need others' help.
Yeah, okay. And I would say this on that note, when we talked about nonprofit before, I was a little bit, here's where my concern was. Again, this is why I asked the question in the beginning of the group. Concern nonprofit. I know that I can be very, I can be in the way of a nonprofit organization. I can be in the way. My biggest concern, this is what my ability and my gifting operates. I understand the law. My biggest concern is whatever anybody does is, do you understand the law? That's our biggest concern. Can do is get into a and not understand the law. Therefore, what we do is we do create what Randall said, the same thing. We're not really helping, we're not really doing this, but we're pretty much creating a whole other religious structure, I'm using religion as an example. We create a religious structure. What keeps you from creating that is understanding and also understanding the statutes. Here's the reason why you go for that. I have a right. That's a statute. The law says we can't go for this particular thing. But then the statute is, here's the limit to that law. When this happens, it creates a limit to that law. Therefore, we have a right to go to this particular thing. That was very important to me, that everybody understood the law, statutes, or else what we're doing is get involved in something that really is taking it, is not beneficial. My biggest thing is that everybody understands the law. I'll get out of the way. In my relationship with Beth, that's how it worked. In my relationship with her, and when we first got married, there was a whole things that I was very law based. She was no law at all. She was like water. Nothing, anything goes. Use an example I was sharing with some other people. I think it may have been Crystal. Bev was the type of person that I was trained, look, you go to bed early so you can get up early. I was trained that way. Get your rest so that you can get up early and you have energy. I was trained that the morning and the daytime, the light, and all of those kind of things were used for this particular time. It was used like this. That's how I was trained. Well, what would happen is I would get up 7, 8, 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. The earlier, the better was for me. And so I go to work. I get off. Guess what? Ben's motor don't start ticking until 2 or 3 o'clock. And that's when she wants to start working. Or 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. Well, I just got home. This is our relationship. Well, I just got. And so Ben will work till 1, 2, 5 in the house. I want to go to bed. Well, it created certain things. If you talk, she's not here right now, or she would share her perspective of it. But she here recently, she said, "I understand the." You see, it was a free for all. It didn't matter. All right, and so there was boundaries crossed. Let me tell you what happens in most relationships when this happens. Most people don't understand this. When you get off, when you're about to get married, and Micaiah, Astaria, put this in your book. Areas where if one of you are law-based and the other one isn't. Areas where you walk over the law without a statute or bringing it to the law, when they get 40 or 50 years old, it will turn into resentment. You see, I've had that in my relationship. Where areas now, I feel resentment toward there, and I didn't know. I didn't know that I didn't know. All I was doing, okay, all right, it's just my way. My way is 8 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Her way is 5 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And okay, that's just different personalities. That's how I deal with it. Because I dealt with that, by the time I turned 50, that crystallized into a resentment. And I learned from that point. Sometimes I'm passing down some valuable information. I learned from that point that there were certain statutes. When someone is law based, you have to apply a statute. Here's the reason. Here's why this is important, that we need to go that time limit right now. If you just go off over the time limit without any of that, I guarantee you, when you get up, you keep on doing that, and in your relationship is going to and frustration. That is a guarantee. Very powerful information. So, in saying that, my biggest thing was understanding that if we do anything like that, when you're talking to me and a law-based person, you need to tell me what you understand, and you need to. Here is the amendment to that law. Randall and Sherry, both. This is what gifting. So I'll keep us straight. Be sure that I'll keep us straight. I won't allow this to crystallize into another religious group. It won't happen. As long as I'm able to, as long as we keep on interacting with each other in this area. When Chauncey came to talk to me the other day, and he said, hey, look, this is a conversation me and Crystal station. But here's a conversation that and Crystal talked to me. Here's a conversation that what I think they will tell you is, I'm going to tell them, here's the law. And they're going to, and you walk over here. That's my biggest concern. Here's the law. You didn't apply amendment here. You didn't apply a statute here. Therefore, you are guilty of trespassing. That is very important. In every gift that we have, I guarantee you we're going to trespass each other if you don't understand the statute. There are going to be places to where I'm going to say, hey, let's do it this way. Sherry, what you just went through, what you felt, and it went through. The problem is law statute. How if there was different, I'm saying going to I'm not saying the group, going to on your trip. Any issues that come, it's going to be law statute. Understanding statute, and the more you understand that, the more you understand how to keep from stepping on trespassing other people. The law statute. What's the law here? If someone comes to you and they say, I'm offended, and this is not happening right now, I'm giving you an example. They say, I'm offended. Here's what you did to offend me. In that conversation, you cannot then say, well, here's what you did to me. You broke the law. Unless you have a statute, you have no right to do that. Your job is in this house is to listen to that person and address their concern. Don't hold in stuff that you held in. Well, they was doing this and then I never said nothing to them. Now they bring it up. Now I'm going to bring this up. You break some laws when you do that. You break statutes. I see this all the time. Those are pet peeves of mine. Just giving an example. You can't do it. I'm a and statute man. Go ahead.
I have a challenge. Is the law and all of this supposed to be in place before we make an effort, or does some of the understanding happen after it's initiated and we figure it out along the way?
There's a basic amount of the law that you need to understand, a very basic amount of law that you understand. There is some of it that is established as you're going underway, some of it is established before. So for instance, biblically, where when it came down to accepting the Gentile the New Testament, and James says, here are the main things we're concerned about that they need to understand. But all of this other stuff, they don't need to understand. Make sure they have this, and this. They're basics. There are basics that all of us should have. All of us should know that there is a standard. That this standard is not based off of my opinion or your opinion. If this is not established before you start operating in gifting, it's going to create some problem. An example, if we don't agree on a particular standard, it can create problems. If we go in there and start trying to do something together, it can create a problem. These are points you need to be settled in order to work together.
So let me ask this question here. So when Sherry started talking about the non-for-profit, one of the words that came up was grassroots. And so the non-for-profit basically got shot down, and it got it's kind of like, well, if we can't do it from grassroots, we're not doing it the right way. And so, well, we obviously are not going to be able to get grassroots first. Something has to be initiated for grassroots. Something has to be stimulated for roots to grow. And so, for the sake of not trespassing these laws, with the understanding that we have, then what I would propose is that we find a way to at least start contributing to the money that would go toward a project. We don't think in terms of non-for-profit. Just think in terms of, let's build this account up until we have something to work with, and then go from there.
I honestly, our time is about up. It's we have a special meeting today, so I don't know, Rhonda, if we have all the time to go into that and address that. I'm gonna try to close it. What I would say to that is, I feel like this is just my take, that I'm more comfortable. I'm not saying that it has to go this way. I'm more comfortable with establishing a particular, hey, if I say let's buy this, and everybody agrees to that, then we say, here's how we're doing it. We're either going to save money or nonprofit. Here are that operate within profit. So that also was a part of the conversation when I mentioned grassroots. That is not something that you just have to. We have to. It's a very important part. Where this is in Scripture is what that's called grassroots. So after the day of Pentecost, after they and it says they had all things in common. They gave, and they had all things in common. That's grassroots. That's established grassroots. So there's a picture of that, but there's also a picture of I'm fine with a nonprofit organization as the laws are understood. Yes, I trust if you don't tell me what the law is and what the amendment of the law is. I'm still standing.